Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We're going to continue today with our season preview slash review series. We had a couple of teams to talk about, one Western Conference, one Eastern Conference. We've got the Memphis Grizzlies and the Charlotte Hornets. We're going to kick things off with the Grizzlies. Keith, I don't know. Maybe this is just West Coast bias here for me or something like that, or Western Conference bias, I guess. It happens to be the slide that I've got up right now. So we're going to go with the Grizzlies, the team that has to cut 4 players off their roster just to be compliant with league rules. Some decisions to make here coming up.
Yeah, I love how you say West Coast bias.
I know. Then I went, wait.
Probably should be an Eastern Conference team.
Yes.
And, it's crazy. That's why I continue to say this has nothing to do with what we're podcasting about today or YouTubing about, I guess, is they got to put 2 teams that are truly West teams when they expand, and then let's get Memphis to the East where they belong. It's a little crazy that they're a Western Conference team. I get it. Geographically, they are. That Minnesota and New Orleans are all pretty close, but yeah. And then, quite frankly, maybe do away with conferences and do the divisions different. I don't know. It'll probably never happen though. Memphis, they're in an interesting spot here. They had an extremely busy offseason, so we can get into that. So players added: Steven Adams, Santi Aldama. He was one of their draft picks, the 30th pick that they acquired late in the draft process. Jarrett Culver, Chris Dunn, Carson Edwards, Sam Merrill, Daniel Oturu, and Zaire Williams. He came along with Adams after they traded up with the Pelicans. That trade also saw there's a couple guys that aren't on this list because we're doing this off of who they still have, because they have added and shuffled off of Patrick Beverly, Eric Bledsoe, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, Rajon Rondo. All those guys have they hopefully they did not buy property in Memphis.
I don't think they even set foot, any of them, in Memphis.
No. None of them did. I think the next time we'll see them in Memphis is the next time their current teams play the Grizzlies.
Yep.
But yeah, and then players lost: Grayson Allen, Tim Frazier, Sean McDermott, who was one of their two-way players, Jonas Valanciunas, and Justice Winslow. So you can see the players added list is a little bit bigger than the players lost list. And then players retained: Kyle Anderson, Desmond Bane, Dylan Brooks, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr., Tyus Jones, John Conchar, DeAnthony Melton, John Morant, Killian Tilly, one of their two-way guys, and Xavier Tillman. So this was a pretty deep team with a lot of guaranteed contracts. They made a couple shuffles in and out, and as Trevor said, 4 guys got to go still. They're +4. The guy I don't have listed on here is Yves Pons, because we don't put the training camp invite guys on these slides. My guess is it's really going to be about 3 guys who got to go, because they'll probably convert him to a 2-way contract with Killian Tilly, and then 3 guys got to go. So I'm going to go off script here a little bit from our normal, and let's go right to it. Who do you think the 3 guys are that get waived from this team? And I'm putting Trevor on the spot here, everybody. He did not know I was going to ask him this.
That's a tough call. I mean, because they've got, like you said, they were a deep team last year. They had a lot of guys that they leaned on. I remember, even Xavier Tillman had some nice moments. Daniel Oturu, I don't know about him. I don't know. I
can give you my picks.
I'm kind of stuck. I'm kind of looking at Oturu, but I know they could probably use another big potentially.
Maybe
I'll go Oturu, Merrill. I'm getting ahead of myself there to the Hornets. I'll go Oturu, Merrill, and Carson Edwards, just to pick some.
Yeah, I think so. We're in agreement on Oturu and Edwards. I'm not sure Chris Dunn makes it. I think Merrill, just because this team has been forever in need of shooting, and he can do that a little bit. I think maybe Chris Dunn goes. I think Chris Dunn could help, but this team already has so many guards. They have Morant. They have Desmond Bane. Dylan Brooks plays a lot at guard. They have Tyus Jones. They also have DeAnthony Melton, who's a really nice player who I know they want to get more minutes for. So maybe they decide yeah, we don't need yet another guard kind of muddying these waters, and let's move on from them. So, all right, so we can get into the real meat of the show here. So we went through who they added, who they lost, who they retained. Other changes, no extensions here yet. Jaren Jackson Jr. we're waiting on. We think he'll probably good chance he'll get a rookie scale extension. We'll see what that looks like. If you're Memphis, you're trying to get that at a kind of team friendly number, just because he hasn't been healthy for a couple years now for them. And if you're Jackson, you're looking at it and saying, hey, I'm one of the better unique bigs. There was I wish I could find the tweet now. I can't. But this was during the hiatus last year. I'd put together just some interesting stats, and one of them was Jaren Jackson Jr. joined Channing Frye and Karl Anthony Towns as players who were 6'11" and above, as guys who had shot a significant number of 3-pointers. It was like 4+ attempts per game, and hit the percentage that they hit. So both volume and percentage wise were there. They were the only 3 guys that were 6'11" or taller to do that. So he's still a pretty unique player. So let's just go there real quick.
Yeah.
What would you give him in an extension? What do you feel like is fair for him right now?
I mean, he's the kind of guy where, like you said, he's got the ability to step outside and shoot the 3, and that is so important for modern bigs in terms of just hitting that next level. He's not a guy where you're going to be forced to play him at the 5 all the time because he can't really space the floor for you or anything like that. His release, it's a little bit awkward. Like, he doesn't shoot an effortless shot or anything, but it goes in. He makes a lot of them. I'm very, very high on him. I'm probably trying to lock him up on a 4-year deal, and I'm going to see if I can get him around 20 million and maybe build in some protection because of that injury risk. I don't know if he'll go for something like that, but if I'm Memphis, that's what I'm hoping for right out of the gate.
Yeah, and that's about where I am, somewhere between 480 and 488, like in that range. And my guess is he probably wants 400.
Yeah,
and
that's where I was too.
Yeah, we'll see if they land somewhere in between those. So yeah, it is kind of just something to keep an eye on. That's probably their other than the waivers that we talked about. That is probably their last piece of significant business that this team needs to do, because obviously their roster is pretty well full. They've got all these guys. The other thing too, when we talk about these waivers, just to be clear, these are not straightforward cuts because these are non-guaranteed guys or camp guys. They have 18 players on fully guaranteed contracts. So that's what we're talking about here. Where we're talking about, yeah, they got to waive somebody and eat a little bit of money on the books here, and they're already eating about 8 million, or I'm sorry, 4.8 million for Rajon Rondo, 2.7 million for Marc Gasol, and then Jonte Porter's on their books for 3 million. So you're already up, over $7-8 million in dead money on your books. With that, they do have 4.9 million. They've not used their room exception yet, so they do have that for spending power down the line, maybe, because again,
they don't have roster spots
horse here, but they don't have roster spots. So all right, so let's get into it a little bit more. So projected starters for this team. You can go ahead and go first if you would like.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this a bit. John Morant, Dylan Brooks, I think those guys are pretty locked in. Then you've got, of course, Jaren Jackson Jr., Steven Adams. By the way, physically, is there any player in the NBA that looks more like their team than Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies? I think that's just the perfect fit for them.
Yeah.
And then I think Kyle Anderson's at the 3. I do bring up the question of, what does Desmond Bane's development look like? Could you see a lot of minutes where Dylan Brooks slides to the 3 and you've got Bane into the 2 to provide that extra shooting there? But I do think it's Kyle Anderson out of the gate, at least to start at the 3 for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe if you decided you wanted a little more size off the bench, maybe then Anderson goes to the bench, because he can kind of play 3-4 for you off the bench versus be kind of making do with Tillman and Clark. The one thing this team doesn't really have is a true backup 5. They get by with Tillman and Clark, but those guys are more small ball options. But I think when your 3 big rotation is essentially Adams, Jackson, and Clark for the most part, you're pretty good, because Jackson can slide over and play the 5, especially against backup groups, and you're pretty good there. So I'm with you on the starting 5: Adams, Jackson, Anderson, Brooks, and Morant. And then I just talked through a couple pieces. I think their rotation pieces, pretty clear. It's Brandon Clark, Desmond Bain, DeAnthony Melton, Tyus Jones, and Xavier Tillman. We'll see, can a Jared Culver break into that? If
Right.
Chris Dunn makes the team, could he break into that rotation somewhere? There's been a lot of talk that maybe Tyus Jones could be a guy that gets put forward in a trade. I do think that this team could be ripe for a consolidation trade when we get to the trade deadline. If they're looking at it and say, boy, we really need to add one guy who can fill this one role. They've got a bunch of those good mid-range contracts that they could put together to go get a guy like that. So I think that's just another thing to kind of keep in mind with this group. Rotation. Is there anybody else on this roster that stands out for you that could really break into a rotation role?
I mean, DeAnthony Melton is a guy that I've been a big fan of since he came into the draft. I was shocked that he fell as far as he did. I like him a lot, so I think that he could be a difference maker for. But I don't think that's a shock, though. I think he's already factored in as part of the rotation. John Concar, he seems to have this ability where, and maybe it's just when I see the Lakers play him, but he always just steps on the floor and does good things, right? And so. Yeah. He's a guy that you have to keep an eye on, but other than that, I think you nailed the guys that are really going to be parts of the rotation or key pieces anyway.
And I think what gets interesting there is Zaire Williams and Santi Aldama probably not going to play very much for this team as rookies, and I think that's okay. I think in summer league, now summer league's not the be all end all, and we don't overreact to it, but neither one of them looked very good in summer league. They both looked like they need lots of development time, but that's okay, and that's fine. Get them to the G League, let them develop there, and then we'll move forward from there. So into our next question about this, what do you think this team's biggest strength is?
I mean, Ja Morant, where he goes, they go. He's their just ability to attack on the offensive end. That is a major strength because you've got a guy that's so dynamic. His ability to get in the paint really sets things up, and then when you combine that with Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., and his ability to shoot from outside, that makes a really lethal combo. So I like that, but overall, if I'm looking at just this Grizzlies roster, it's the depth. It's the fact that they can really come at you in waves, and they've got that kind of, it's not the grit and grind Grizzlies anymore, but they still kind of have that mentality where they're going to outwork you. And so when you add up all of that, you've got a team that's no fun to deal with, right? On a random Wednesday night in January, they can give anybody a run for their money. And so I think that is a strength of theirs. They're not a top tier team by any means, but they're also not a team that you can overlook.
Yeah, I like that one. I think for me, it's their overall depth.
Yeah.
I think this team has really good quality depth. I think they go at least 10, if not 11 or 12 guys deep in NBA players, which is huge. That's big. Hopefully this year, more on a normal schedule with more days off, and hopefully, knock on wood, less COVID concerns and those kind of things. Hopefully, you won't have to rely on that deep depth quite as much. But I do think that they have really good depth. Switching over to their biggest weakness, I think their biggest weakness for me is just shot creation outside of Ja Morant. They're very reliant on him to create a lot, and they have to get things through scheme quite a bit, where it is running guys off screens and a lot of off-ball stuff and those kind of things. And they no longer have the benefit of dump it into Valanciunas in the post and play through him if things are really going, because that's just not something Steven Adams does. So I think that's probably my biggest weakness for this team is how do they create offense when it's not Ja Morant. And yes, I know Dillon Brooks can create shots, but it's always his own shots, and they are quite often ones where you're like, oh boy, I love Dillon Brooks' confidence, and I would always have a spot for Dillon Brooks on my team just because I think you need guys like that. But that's more a guy I think I would like a lot better in 20 minutes a night off the bench, just letting it fly, than somebody who's getting 20 shots a night in 35 minutes as a starter.
Well, Keith, it's funny because that was actually my biggest weakness of the team is they are asking Dillon Brooks to do too much, right? It's just a little bit above what he should be asked to do. If you trim down that role a little bit, and that means probably adding in some other pieces and things like that, he can be, I think, a lot more effective. But I think they're needing him to do a little bit more than he's capable of, and that's creating some really inefficient play. And part of it is, like you said, it's just him. He's very, very confident and all of that. But I think that he's just being asked to do a little bit too much in terms of that shot creation, getting things going for other people, which doesn't happen all that often. So that's certainly a challenge of theirs moving forward.
Yep, completely agree. All right, good, bad, or indifferent off season. What do you think?
I'm kind of indifferent here on this offseason. I was hoping that this was going to be a team that really took a big step forward, and I can't say they took a step back or anything like that, but I was hoping they would take a big step forward. You move out Valanciunas, you bring back Steven Adams, you did, flip-flopped all these veterans, Eric Bledsoe and Rondo and all that, and you basically, it all comes down to Jarrett Culver. There just wasn't that big move that made me say, oh, wow, the Grizzlies are ready. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with this season. Like, I can't even put them up into that that middle tier yet in the Western Conference. Pretty much it's almost the way I feel about the Dallas Mavericks, where if they are better than last season, it's going to be because Ja Morant is simply that much better than he was last season. Just like the Mavericks, if they're going to be better, it's going to be because Luka just gets that much better, not because they added in all these pieces that are great fits and now they're ready to make the leap or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm with you on indifferent. They did a lot of stuff. I just don't know how much of it necessarily moved them forward this year. I just think it was this flurry of transactions. And when I look at it, it's, Adams isn't as good as Valanciunas, and they added a couple young guys that may take a couple years. Now, I think what they did nice long term was they've got some decisions to make because we mentioned Jackson's due for an extension this year. Kyle Anderson's going to be a free agent after the season, so that's something that they're going to have to deal with at some point. Tyus Jones, Chris Dunn, if he makes it. Those guys are also coming up on free agency after this year, so we'll see where that all goes. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't think they did enough, and I don't know if in the West their internal improvement is going to be enough to continue to keep them ahead of some of the other teams. I think we've got teams that are pretty good now. I don't think this team's going to be bad by any means. I don't think they're going to slip down towards OKC and Houston at the bottom of the conference.
They're not a tanking team.
But I struggle to see how they get out of the play-in mix. I just think they're somewhere in that 7 to, let's call it 11 or 12 range, teams that are fighting for the play-in in the West. And there's no way I can see them in the top 6.
Yeah, agreed. And do you want to just get into where we're projecting them for this season?
Yeah, so let's do that. Let's do the range of finish.
Yeah.
What's your high end?
So my high end for them, I've got them up at 6 on the high end. And then the low end, I've got them down at the bottom of the play-in. So obviously not a huge range there, but I've got them. I did a ranking, sort of a tier-based ranking the other day for the Western Conference for Lakers Nation, and I had Memphis finishing up about 9. So I've got them on the high end at about 6 and the low end at 10. And most realistically, I see them just in terms of overall talent and where I feel like they would fit in things in like a power ranking type situation. I've got them sitting about 9.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Your high end's a little higher and your low end's a little higher. So you've got them more pretty stable. I think high end 7 or 8. So I'll say 7. I'll be optimistic. I think low end, I could see them being 12. It doesn't go as well, and a handful of teams pass them.
So you're thinking like Sacramento?
Kind of get ahead of them. Yeah, I could see Sacramento passing them. I could see maybe if everything went right for the Spurs, maybe the Spurs end up better than them. They'll definitely be better than OKC. I think they'll definitely be better than Houston. I think they'll definitely be better than Minnesota. Then it kind of after that, they're right there with New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio. I think they're more in that grouping. But 2 years ago, I picked them to be the worst team in the NBA, and they almost made the playoffs. So my track record with picking against the Grizzlies is not all that great. All right, what is your biggest question remaining for this team going into the season? Is if it's something different than that we haven't covered already?
No, it's pretty much just it's how are they getting to that next level? What is the move from here? Because it felt like I said, this offseason they made moves, but they were just kind of, they're running on the treadmill, right? They didn't really get anywhere. So how do you take that next step aside from just, we believe Ja is going to get better and Jaren Jackson Jr. is going to get better, and then we're off and running? Like, does Steven Adams make you that much better compared to having Valanciunas in there? I don't think they're different players, but I don't think that's taking your team to the next level. So what is their plan? Because pretty soon, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., these young guys they've got, they're going to be itching to really win, and then you can find yourself in a tough situation.
Yeah, no, I'm going to add on to
Yeah.
that. I guess the way I add on to that is, do they make a trade? Do you start to combine some of these
Yeah.
guys? And why not? If you're looking at, or we're not going to be able to keep Kyle Anderson, we're not going to be able to keep Tyus Jones, and do you really need to? Those are kind of different questions you can ask, but that's over $18 million in salary matching right there. That goes a long way. Now you add to that the couple other guys, and now you're up over 20, and you can just about get in the mix for any player who may come available. And I do wonder, are they one of those teams that could jump in there on a guy that's, wow, that's interesting, the Grizzlies went for him, can they convince him to stay? But is
Mm-hmm.
that kind of more of just a, hey, we're going to make this move and get this guy for a couple years and hopefully playing with Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr.? By all accounts, everything I know, people love Memphis. That the fans have gotten super behind this team,
Mm-hmm.
especially through the grit and grind years and all those kind of things. I do think the Adams signing is maybe trying to get back to that, kind of team where we're going to beat you up physically and those kind of things, or the Adams acquisition, I should say, not signing. But yeah, I that's my biggest question is, do you cash in some pieces to push this thing forward? Is that the way you go about this?
Yeah, that may be the end result for that. And it may be, like you said, taking a gamble on somebody whose value is a little bit depressed because they've got free agency pending or something like that. And then just betting on the fact that you're going to convince them to stay, kind of like Oklahoma City did with Paul George a few years ago.
Yep, completely agree. Yeah, I'm with you. Yes, is that the way you go? And is there somebody who unexpectedly they go out and say, hey, you
Mm-hmm.
know what, we're gonna go get this guy and we're gonna make this work? So yeah, ready to move on to
Let's do
the
it.
Charlotte Hornets. All
Let's
right.
head on over and talk about the Charlotte Hornets. And maybe, Keith, maybe I saved this one just because I love this graphic. This is my favorite of all the graphics that you've done so far for this.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's just cool looking with the honeycomb background and all that here with the Hornets. So aesthetically
I
pleasing.
appreciate that.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I like this one too. I love Charlotte's color scheme with the
Yes.
teal and purple.
Yep.
It's one of my favorites in the league. So, all right, let's look at guys they added. James Bouknight in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
Wesley Awundu came over in the trade, the Devontae Graham sign and trade. Kai Jones was added in the draft.
Love that pick.
Arnaldus Koboka, he was drafted a couple years ago. He's coming in on a two-way. Scotty Lewis, another guy who was added at the draft. He's going to be on a two-way. They signed Kelly Oubre Jr. That one was a bit of a surprise
Mm-hmm.
after Oubre kind of sat out there for a little bit. Charlie used their remaining 12 million or so in cap space to go get him. They traded for Mason Plumlee of Detroit.
Yep.
They signed Dish Smith to come in and be their backup point guard. And then they added JT Thor, one of the best names in the draft.
Best name.
Also another guy they added at the draft. This one, I had to change the graphic a little just to fit it because they had so much roster change. But players lost: Bismack Biyombo, Nate Darling, one of their two-way guys, Devontae Graham, that's clearly the biggest loss they had. Caleb Martin, one of the two Martin twins, he was waived. He's since caught on with the Miami Heat. Malik Monk finally came into his own and seems like he got past his personal issues and now is playing pretty good ball, but he's off to your team, to the
That's
Lakers. Right. Grant Riller, one of their other two-way guys, is gone. Brad Wanamaker and Cody Zeller, a couple veterans there. Players retained: LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, Vernon Carey Jr., Gordon Hayward, Cody Martin, Jalen McDaniels, Nick Richards, Terry Rozier, and PJ Washington. And then Terry Rozier landed the veteran extension that was already signed and inked. And I said this when we talked about that extension getting signed, but it's good to bring it up here too. Go look at Terry Rozier's stat line
before you respond to that extension. Yes.
Before you think like, this is crazy,
Yep.
this guy's not that good. He was great last year for this team. And this team was pretty good and then fell apart late due to injuries because they lost Ball, they lost Hayward. It just really all kind of crumbled on them, and they probably should have been a team that was fighting their way through the play-in and maybe even a playoff team. And I think that's the step that they're hoping to take this next season.
Yeah, Terry Rozier, I mean, just to drive it home, because most people don't think of him as a shooter. 41% from three 2 seasons ago on 6.7 attempts per game, 39% from three last season on 8.3 attempts per game. Like, that's ridiculous. That's quality shooting on high volume. That's what you're getting on it. You can't ask for much more than that.
No.
Plus the fact that he can handle the basketball for the moments when LaMelo Ball, when he swings the ball to somebody else, you've got a secondary creator in Terry Rozier. You've got somebody that can handle the ball when he's out. If you're not going to rely on Ish Smith, it's a great fit. And I think he's not getting enough credit for just how good he's been the last couple of seasons.
Agreed. 4-year, $96 million extension. There's a very small amount that's non-guaranteed in the final year of that, but it's essentially fully guaranteed. I think it's only about 1.7 million or so that they can save. But yeah, and you know what? For what guys are going for, very well worth it for him. A little bit more than Aaron Gordon got, but his numbers were really, really good, as you just put together. So let's get into it. Starting five for the Hornets. I'll go first this time. And I think it's pretty straightforward, but I'm kind of curious to see what you think. Mason Plumlee at the 5, PJ Washington at the 4, Gordon Hayward at the 3, then Rozier and LaMelo in the backcourt. It's kind of, they flip-flop. LaMelo runs the offense, Rozier plays off the ball, and then they flip-flop on defense. Rozier guards the point guards, and LaMelo guards off ball. He generally kind of floats with Hayward and switches there. You got anything different in that starting group?
That is exactly what I had. I think they're actually one of the easier teams in the NBA to project their starting 5, because it seems like it's all pretty set.
You know what I think, too? One thing with this starting 5, that might be one of the better passing starting 5s in the entire NBA.
Yes.
Because Mason Plumlee's a very good passer for a big man. You can run a lot of stuff through him at the elbows where he does stuff. I always go back to when he was in Denver, they ran a lot of the same stuff when Jokic was out of the game, just using Plumlee because he is a good passer. Hayward, we know, is one of the best passing wings in the game. And then Rozier and Ball are, I think at their heart, they're both really point guards. And LaMelo Ball is already one of the better passers in the league. And Rozier's proven to be a better than average passer. So I do think they can move things out. Rotation players behind them. This is where it gets a little interesting because they don't really have a pure backup 5 on this team.
Right,
so it's young guys. It's guys like Vernon Carey and Nick Richards and those kind of guys that are more towards the bottom of the roster. But I think what they'll do is they'll make do with PJ Washington playing some 5, like he'll slide over and play the 5 when Plumlee's out. Maybe Jalen McDaniels gets used there a little bit, a player that I know they like. But Kelly Oubre's probably going to be the top guy off the bench. Miles Bridges, a little bit of overlap in those two guys, maybe there, but I think you're okay. Ish Smith will be the backup, and many Celtics fans listening to this know when they play against Ish Smith, he generally is a pretty good bet to go off for about 25 points every time. He's just one of those guys that kills the Celtics. And then we'll see if any of the rookies can get in there. I think Kai Jones needs more development time. He looked pretty raw at Summer League, but a ridiculous
super athletic. Yeah, I mean, when you've got, I thought that was a great landing. But when you've got a guard like LaMelo Ball who can do the things he can do, you want athletes all around him that can just run the floor, and it's going to be so much 100%. Fun. It might take time, but I loved that pick. The landing spot's perfect.
I think Kai Jones is one of those guys who I usually use Charlotte as an example, like a Tuesday night in January when you're playing Charlotte.
Yeah.
So let's do a Tuesday night in January when you're playing Oklahoma City. If you're the Hornets, you could throw Kai Jones in there for 20 to 25 minutes and just say, just run and play hard.
Yes.
And we'll get you, we'll get you touches. We'll get you shots at the rim and those kind of things. I really like Jalen McDaniels. I think he really came along strong last year. I think he can play. I think they might try to use him as the backup 5 a little bit, but I'm that's not really his role. He's much more of a pure forward. And then Cody Martin, James Bouknight, we'll see. Maybe Wesley Owundu does one of those two guys emerge more as a potential guard option. One thing we're not going to see is I don't think we're going to see a lot of those three guard groupings that they used last year
Yeah, well,
when
yeah.
they used Graham, Rozier, and Ball together. They just don't have that right mix this year with that. So probably a little bit more traditional lineups, except up front. When Plumlee's out of the game, they're going to have to go small because I just don't know that they have a real true backup for him on this roster right now.
And how are we feeling at this point now that the roster's put together on the Devontae Graham trade, picking up a lottery protected first for him from the Pelicans?
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think they were starting to get a little expensive there in Charlotte, and I think it was one of those things where if you re-signed Graham, anybody should know, and if you don't, you'll know now. He's one of my favorite guys in the league, just because I love the fact that he went from being a guy who looked like his first year, like he might not even be on an NBA team his second year, to, and quite frankly, I think he should have won Most Improved Player. His jump in stats was just insane, and that's how good he is. And I love those guys who come off the bench just firing, and they know exactly who they are, and I'm going to go out there and try to score and make plays and those kind of things. But I get why Charlotte wasn't going to pay him that, and then it made even more sense when they extended Rozier. Then it became all right. Yeah. You can't pay both of those guys and have Ball and Hayward and all these other guys. So yeah, it is one of those things. Now, what I kind of wonder is what happens with Miles Bridges. He's extension eligible, and for the first time last year, started to kind of look like, all right, I can see what this guy is. I think if you could get him for mid-level-ish money, if you're Charlotte, you do it. Enough. If I'm Bridges, I'm saying no way, and I'm betting on myself, knowing that'll still be there for me next summer, as long as I have anything resembling a decent year this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, last season, solid, very, very efficient, 40% from deep, 13 points per game, 6 boards. I do wonder what the addition.
How many threes per game did he take?
How many threes per game? Let's see. That was on 4.5 attempts per game. So not bad.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all.
That's pretty
not
good.
bad at all. So that's solid development there from a wing player. That's what you're going to be looking for from him. I also like the combination here of 0.7 steals and 0.8 blocks per game. That's some pretty good versatility there for a wing. So you like that defensively as well. But I do wonder, what about the addition of Kelly Oubre? What does that mean for Miles Bridges? Does that change his role at all? Does that change his minutes? What happens there? I think that's going to be something really curious to keep an eye on.
Yeah, my guess is you're seeing. So I'm going to group McDaniels in that group too, and I think what you're looking at is McDaniels is a 4-5 for the Hornets, Bridges is a 3-4, and Oubre I think they're hoping is a 2-3. I think that's what you're hoping for there. Now Oubre at the 2 has never been really good.
No.
Because he kind of gets, his shot can be kind of inconsistent, but I think as long as he's out there with Hayward or Rozier, you've got enough shooting that it can do that. And I think their hope is when they need a stretch element at the 5, you go to PJ Washington, and I think that's how maybe you get you get Bridges or Oubre. Sorry, the dog wants in here. You get Bridges or Oubre on the floor more, maybe at the end of games, if that's what you need. Probably if you need offense, maybe Oubre. If you need defense, you go with Bridges and go small, because I do think Bridges' activity defensively started to show up a little bit more. But yeah, it's a little bit of a weird roster construction. I wouldn't be surprised if this is one that's solved with a trade at some point this season.
It's weird, but I don't mind it, because what you've got too much of, and we can argue whether or not it's actually too much, but it's the thing that everybody wants, and that's wings, right? So you're fine. You're fine. It's so easy to move one of those guys because so many teams are dying to get that kind of player, whether it's a Miles Bridges or a Kelly Oubre or whoever it is, McDaniels, right? Those guys are going to be in demand around the NBA. And so you want to have, if anything, more than you think you need of that type of player, because it'll be an easy move to make if down the line something pops up.
Yeah, and they're another team that's going to have to eat a guaranteed contract. They have 16 guaranteed contracts right now. So my guess is that'll probably be one of the bigs, either Carey or Richards, maybe Cody Martin, maybe it could be one of those guys. Maybe Wesley Owundu. I'm not exactly sure where he fits on this roster, so we'll see. But they are going to have to get a guaranteed contract at some point. So, and just to close the book on it, they have no real spending power left. They use the vast majority of their room exception on Ish Smith. So they don't have anything left to run out there and sign with. So that'll take us to the question of biggest strength for this team.
I think the biggest strength of this team is their offensive versatility. And you already mentioned their passing. You've got so many guys who can do so many different things, right? Gordon Hayward can attack off the bounce. Terry Rozier can. LaMelo Ball can. Plumlee is a more versatile player, I think, than he gets credit for, particularly when you start incorporating his passing as well. They're the kind of team that can really drive and kick on you when they're hitting, right? They're the kind of team that can really get going on the offensive end of the floor and just come at you in waves because they have so many different guys that can handle the basketball, that can pass, that can shoot. They can really kind of, I don't know what I want to say here, spread their wings on offense because they have so many different options to turn to and different playing styles they can use there on offense. So I think that right there is going to be their biggest strength. That's their overall offensive versatility. They're a team that, like on League Pass, I'm going to be tuning in to watch this team and watch them play specifically for the offensive end of the floor and the potential they've got there.
Yeah, so that's more or less the same answer I was going to give. We, like you said, we talked about their passing. I think they have enough shooting. Let's see, do they have enough finishing around the basket? Bridges is obviously he's one of the better dunkers in the league. He threw down a couple absolute monster highlights. If it wouldn't get us booted off YouTube, we'd splice those in here because they were just that much fun. But yeah, he was ridiculous. And then their relative ability to play a lot of different styles. Let's see if they can finish around the rim a little bit better. I think their offense has a chance to be really good. I think their biggest weakness is their defense.
Yes.
I think wing defense, they're okay. I think they'll cobble it together. I'm worried about their interior defense. I don't think it's going to be very good. Yeah. It's even last year, at least they had Bismack Biyombo that you could throw out there to do a little bit inside. So I'm a little bit worried about that. I think they've got a collection of guys who are okay rebounders, but nobody who's going to really be a great rebounder. So maybe this is the sum of the whole is more than the sum of the parts with their rebounding. Maybe that's the way it goes with them, but I just wonder. And then the last thing I'll say is I'd like to see them play faster. They were per basketball reference.
They should be
20th in pace. Last year, they
can't win if they're going to continue doing that.
Yeah,
that's not the way this team's built.
Got to be faster. Yep, yeah. Push that ball up the floor. Lean into your offense a little bit more and get in there because you've got enough guys that can do that. Do stuff there. So
yeah, absolutely.
Anything else for you? Weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean this team defensively in terms of just look at their rim protection. Mason Plumlee, I like him as a player, but he barely registers as a negative impact on opponents' field goal percentage at the rim. Just barely. He's not scaring anybody from attacking the basket, and they don't really have that many guys that are going to step in and do that. And not to say that you have to play, like the NBA is getting smaller, the NBA is getting faster. You don't have to have a true traditional center out there clogging up the paint 48 minutes per night. You just don't, right? But you have to have some sort of deterrent at the rim for at least key portions of the game, and they don't have that. So I think they're going to get lit up on defense, but the way you mitigate that is, like you said, you play fast. You can't be 20th in pace. You just can't. Nope. You've got to play faster. You've got to let your offense get out and go, and that's going to be really important for this team this season.
Yeah, I'd like to see them push being a top 10.
Yes, absolutely.
They should be. They've got all the
it
the
fits
talent
LaMelo.
in the world with that.
It fits your star.
It fits LaMelo. Even Hayward, not that he's the fastest guy, but he does well when the team plays quick because he's such a good passer and he's such a good shooter and he can do a lot of different things. He's also a guy, if you push it up quickly, you don't have something immediately, he's a nice guy to kick it to on the wing and let him make a decision from there as a secondary attack. So yeah, I would like to see this team definitely play faster. Good, bad, or indifferent offseason. I'll go first this time. I'm leaning slightly towards the good, just because the guys they lost, I don't feel like are, other than Devontae Graham, major losses. But I think I think Plumlee will be as good for them as Cody Zeller and Biombo were. I think Oubre has a chance to very different than Devontae Graham, but I think has a chance to be better for what this team needs. And then I think Ish Smith fills in the backup playmaking just enough. And then I do like the two guys that they got in the draft in Book Knight and Jones.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know about this year for those guys, but I think Book Knight maybe has a chance to play a little bit more than Jones, just because I think he's more offense ready. If they need another guard in the rotation, I think he's ready to step in and do it. And then I think Jones will get there eventually. So I'm going to lean slightly towards the good, but it's barely that beyond indifferent.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You took all the words out of my mouth in terms of the moves that they made in the draft and everything else that I like. So it's good, but again, I think they made better moves than the Grizzlies did. But I can't say this team made a bunch of moves that have clearly vaulted them up a tier at this point. I think they're still sitting in the same tier they were in the Eastern Conference last season,
Yep.
save for the development of LaMelo Ball, the young guys. If those guys you just see organic growth. I don't know that the moves they made vault them up into the next tier just yet. Although I do think that overall they're probably a couple more games won better than they were last season just based on these moves.
Yeah, and I think so. So let's lead that right into range. You can't pick them higher in the East. There's too many good teams in the East now to see them moving past. So clearly, Milwaukee, Brooklyn ahead of them, Miami, Atlanta, Boston, New York, missing some Philadelphia,
Mm-hmm.
pending, that's
What
that's
happens with
kind of our
Simmons?
disclaimer now.
Right.
So maybe they can be better than Chicago, Indiana, Toronto, Washington. I think they're right in that mix with that group in that 7 range. There, I think clearly they're better than Detroit and Orlando. But they're in Cleveland. It's the rest of those teams. I think they're right in that mix. So I'm going to say somewhere in the 7 to 12 range. Kind of same spot where they were last year. So bottom end, I'll say
Mm-hmm.
12 because I just can't see them being worse than any one of Cleveland, Orlando, or Detroit. I think they'll certainly be better than those teams.
Yeah, they're still in that play-in tier for me, and that's why again I
Yeah.
don't think they moved up a tier into the solid playoff teams. I think they're a play-in team. If they get some things to break right during the regular season, then maybe you wind up towards the top of that tier, around that 7 seed or something like that. And if they don't, then we could be talking about this team saying what happened, why did they regress, and they could be somewhere down missing the play-in. And it might not be that they regressed. It could be that they just didn't improve enough, and other teams like say Chicago, maybe Indiana, like they got better or they had better seasons, and that just kind of knocked the Hornets down a little bit. The Eastern Conference as a whole, I think, is better. So for a team like the Hornets that maybe they improved a little bit, it might seem like they actually stepped back just because the other teams around them got better.
Yep, agreed. Biggest question for me is, can they find a way to defend enough to break into that top 6? I think that's pretty straightforward there. I don't have anything else to go to.
100%. I'm right there with you on that.
All right, ready to spin the wheel?
Let's do it. Let's find out who's next.
All right, guys. So as everybody knows, we find these out right now, which teams we're going to review next. The only guarantee is we know Boston and the LA Lakers will not be, as the Clippers now, right? They're on even footing in LA. That's what Steve Ballmer would have me believe. They're on even footing with the Lakers now with their new arena. Does look pretty cool.
It does look like a nice arena. It looks like a pretty nice arena. But did you see how excited Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were about it? They were thrilled.
Right?
So excited.
That was the epitome of you must be at this work function, even though you don't want to go. Yeah, that was me. I had that look on my face many a times.
I'm just here so I don't get fined.
In my former career. Yeah, exactly. Basically. So what we do is we spin this. We're just going to keep Boston and the Lakers separate if they come up. So we'll respin. So let's see. The Indiana Pacers.
Okay.
And the Golden State Warriors.
Oh.
Two
yellow and blue.
Yellow teams.
Yeah. We got a color theme right there. Those will be good. Those will be good. I'm excited about the Warriors. The Warriors I've got a lot to say about. And then the Indiana Pacers. We'll see. There could be some big changes coming from them mid-season.
Definitely, no doubt. Yeah. So we'll see. And then guys, we will be back with you later in this week with news catch ups and those
Yep.
kind of things. Right now, just so we're all on the same page for everybody watching and listening here, the news is starting to slow down a little bit, but every time we say that, then we get 4 or 5 new things that
That
we weren't
means Ben Simmons
expecting.
is getting traded in like an hour.
Yeah, right. Exactly. A Ben Simmons trade is probably going to come at any point here. But yeah, but we're probably going to be focused on knocking out these review previews over the next little bit here. But if there is news, we'll be on it. We'll react to it and get into it. But yeah, we're excited. Uh, man, by Monday rolls around, we'll be a week away from media day, and on Tuesday, a week away from training camps opening. Then we'll have actual stuff
That's
to
right.
talk about, because that's when we'll start getting injury updates and find out what real stories are with guys who are back, not back, and those kind of things. So yeah, pretty excited.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. I'm ready for it. It still feels like too far away, but also close enough to where we can be excited and get ready for it. So all that's coming up. And don't forget, everybody, make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. If you listen to the podcast version of this, make sure you follow us, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever. But hit that subscribe button over on the NBA Front Office YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications as well. And of course, like this video. Till next time, everybody, stay safe and see ya.